Good afternoon. I'm Len Zananti, and I want to thank everyone for joining us to discuss this vital issue of water quality. First and foremost, I want to thank the organizers of this event for their hard work and putting this together, and that's Lynn Arthur, Sheila Pfeiffer, and Nancy Kane, who were organizing this. I would also like to recognize our special guests today as well. Assemblyman Scavone, Wendy Pearson, the Executive Director of the Stony Brook Southampton campus, Dean Paul Shutson of the Stony Brook Ocean Marine and Atmospheric Science School, Megan Magyar of the Lake Agawam Conservancy, Ann Welker, our county legislator, current town trustee Joe McLaughlin, former Mayor Irving, and my fellow trustee Rob Coburn from the Village Board of Trustees. This has been a terrific collaboration coming together between our Village Environmental and Sustainability Committee, headed by Sheila Pfeiffer, the Lake Agawam Conservancy, represented by Lynn Arthur, and the New York Center for Clean Water Technology, headed by Dr. Chris Gobler and Tom Barley, who will obviously participate today. We will have a panel which will be moderated by legislator Ann Welker, and it would include design engineer David Rhodes, Tri-State Surveying, and Peter Topping from the Econic Baykeeper. In this village, sustainability has been the centerpiece of my work as a trustee for the last 2.5 years. Today's session will highlight a key component of a broader sustainability agenda that impacts quality of life, public health, infrastructure, economic development, and certainly water quality. It's no secret that Lake Agawam is one of the most polluted lakes in Suffolk County, evidenced by harmful algae blooms every summer over a decade. This issue plagues 4 other ponds locally as well. The village is committed to science-based solutions and has invested in many plans for the last 10 years to identify and address the root causes of this pollution. Our latest effort is the village-wide water quality plan. Its goal is simple: eliminate or mitigate all nitrogen and phosphorus inputs and prevent new sources of pollution. Today's focus is on a key part of that plan: reducing nitrogen from residential septic systems that leach into our groundwater. In addition to hearing about the source of the problem, you're also going to hear about the solution and how to pay for it with up to $60,000 of tax-free grant funding. Of the 3,500 or so residential properties in the village, less than 10% have installed new low nitrogen systems. While upgrading is voluntary, we want to encourage you to apply for the grants while you investigate it. Resources are here today to help you apply for the grants and walk you through the options and process from beginning to end. You don't have to make a decision now. You can apply for the grants, find out how much grant money is available to you to replace your system, and then decide if you want to do the installation. Everyone should have a yellow card on your seat, which is your invitation to the no-charge resources committed to assist you. Fill out the card, please, and drop it into one of the silver boxes that you see, and as you leave the room, rather, and neither Tom Barley or Lynn Arthur will contact you based on which boxes you check on the card. Our aim is to get every household to apply for the $60,000 grants. Before I turn the stage over to Dr. Gobler, white index cards have been distributed as well. And on those white cards, please write your question for the panel. If you put your name and phone number or email on the back, if your question didn't get answered today, Tom or Lynn will get back to you. I would like now to introduce Dr. Christopher Gobler of Stony Brook University, who's also the head of the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing there? Good to see everybody so excited about septic systems on a Saturday. What else are we going to do on a Saturday but talk about our septic systems? Okay. Well, great to be here. This is a great event. It's great to see so many people. And this is a pretty serious issue, despite my joking introductory remarks. And so I'm going to talk about nitrogen problems and solutions for the village. And before I do that, I'm going to thank all the young men and women in my lab. They really are the people who generate any of the data you see, and we all owe a debt of gratitude to them for the great work that they do. Okay, and we'll start with the concept of a watershed. Water is so precious for all of us, and it's very easy to forget that every drop of water that hits land plays a critical role. That water is going to the ground, most of it at least, and in the ground it's either our drinking water source that's coming to all of our homes, and if we're not drinking it, the water that's not getting extracted then discharges the surface waters, where it's going to be affecting what's happening in our lakes and our estuaries. And across Suffolk County, there are some trends with regards to the population and with regards to nitrogen in our groundwater. They've both been increasing. The levels of nitrogen now in our groundwater across Suffolk County, at least, are actually quite high. Punchline already, why we're here today actually, across all of Suffolk County, the strongest source of nitrogen, or the biggest source of nitrogen quantitatively to groundwater, is from on-site septic systems. Fertilizers also play a role, but they're generally second in charge, and I'll show some details of this momentarily. If we look at the nitrogen levels in groundwater in Suffolk County, and we look at the entire United States population, so we look here, you can see this y-axis, 200 million people. This is accounting for most of the people in the United States of America. And the bottom line is most of the country, about 2/3, has drinking water with very low levels of nitrogen. Right? So we're in the tail end here that's having higher levels, really towards the tail end. And there's a lot of spatial variability across all of Suffolk County. But if we zoom in, and it's a little blurry, but we look at the village, you see it's kind of a bullseye. Those are some very high levels of nitrate in the groundwater. And again, that's our drinking water source, and that's what's headed for our water bodies. I should have put that up there. This is a model from Suffolk County, but there's confirmation of some of these concentrations as well. And we really don't want 10 milligrams per liter. Okay, before I get into talking about water quality, I'm going to just momentarily talk about nitrate as a public health issue. Those of you who don't know, the EPA has a standard for nitrate in groundwater of 10 milligrams per liter. That's really mainly for a very rare medical syndrome for babies and infants called blue baby syndrome, whereby high levels of nitrate essentially interfere with the ability of the circulatory system to deliver oxygen to babies because of their newly developing circulatory system. However, there's been a growing body of research in the recent decades looking at relationships between high nitrate in drinking water and incidences of cancer. And this just is showing you the science of it all. In any given year, how many publications have there been on this topic, and also how many citations in the literature about that. And so what you see is there's a really, among scientists, a growing interest in this topic. And there's been a lot of papers that have come out. I interact with people at the medical school, for example, at Stony Brook University, and their epidemiologists there were quite interested in this. Nitrate has been classified as a probable carcinogen by the World Health Organization. And there's a whole host of recent papers that have come out, and many in the last year or so, that show links between high nitrate and cancer at levels below 10 milligrams per liter. It's also been associated with adverse birth outcomes as well. This paper from scientists at the Environmental Working Group, but also Duke University, essentially showed that there are, across the country, likely more than 10,000 cases of cancer arising from high nitrate in drinking water, and that fixing that, or that it's costing the healthcare system more than $1 billion annually. The same paper concluded if the standard for nitrate was lowered, that would be protecting human health, and that would also be reducing healthcare costs. And likely, the costs of doing that would be less than the costs currently for the medically addressing this. I'm just putting this up here because earlier this year I was contacted by people from the University of Iowa. Now, I've never been to Iowa, although I actually am going in 2026. I was invited earlier this year. I guess I can disclose that I was happy to have an excuse. I couldn't go because I had a conflict. But the reason I was invited is because they're really struggling with nitrate in their drinking water in Iowa. Now there, it's an agricultural issue, but you can see the headlines there. You know, Iowa now has the second highest rate of cancer in the United States and the fastest increasing rate or rising rate of cancer in the United States. And there are linkages to specifically that 10 milligrams per liter. So you see, new research suggests that nitrate exposure may be toxic at lower levels. So they're struggling with the same issue. In that case, it's agriculture. But it's, you know, and in that case, they're worried about surface waters, but they're also laser focused on the human health outcomes. Okay, I'm not a medical doctor, so that was just me presenting epidemiological evidence. I want to now switch to water quality. And this is a map my lab puts out every single year. It's work that the students in my lab essentially did between the months of April and September, calling out all across Long Island what we call water quality impairments, areas where we had harmful algal blooms in marine and freshwater bodies, and also incidences of low oxygen. And if we zoom in to the village here, you can see 5 different freshwater bodies that had blue-green algae blooms in 2025. And Lake Agawam was the worst of the 5. You can see a lot of week-to-week variability, but what you can also see is the DEC would tell you, well, don't go above 25 micrograms per liter. We were only below that a few weeks during the year. And you can see we had some spectacular peaks that were more than an order of magnitude beyond that on multiple dates. And there's a toxin that I'm going to talk about momentarily associated with these blue-green algae that we worry about as well. It's called microcystin. I'm going to talk about it momentarily, but just to show you that the EPA would say don't go in the water if it's more than 8 micrograms per liter. Don't drink the water if it's more than 0.3. And you can see we had many dates that were far above that standard. So what are these blue-green algae? What is microcystin? Let me talk about that momentarily. So blue-green algae are also known as cyanobacteria. They happen to be the evolutionarily oldest photosynthetic organisms on the planet. They evolved more than 3 billion years ago, but they're still around and causing trouble. These are the 2 most common types of blue-green algae we see in Lake Agawam. And again, they're a concern because they make bioactive compounds. For example, microcystin, which is a gastrointestinal toxin, anatoxin A is a neurotoxin. When these toxins were first discovered in the 20th century, the first name scientists gave to them were fast death factor and very fast death factor. And that's the truth, and that's because of the rapid rate with which lab animals, mice, would expire when exposed to these toxins. And it's not just lab animals. You can see from the medical literature here, these are also a threat to human health as well. And outside of humans, they're a threat to animals. There was a study, or several studies, that came out after a very strange event in the plains of Botswana in Africa, where endangered elephants, hundreds of them, were dying off. And that was a great concern because there really were only hundreds left in this particular area. They were in a preserve, but unfortunately within that preserve area, a bunch of lakes and ponds developed blue-green algae blooms, and along with that, there was the mass die-off of elephants, and multiple papers have connected these events from people across the planet, making those connections. Here in the United States, the CDC has identified that over the years, in this paper here, there's been hundreds of dogs poisoned due to exposure to blue-green algae toxins. And EPA has also made those linkages as well. And we've had events here in the South Fork of dogs getting sick or dying due to exposure to these events and these toxins. And then finally, we don't drink the water, okay, we'll keep our pets away. There's now emerging evidence that the toxins can be aerosolized and be in the air, even just being around these events. So, people are still trying to understand what the dose is, but we do know that these toxins can be aerosolized, so people can be exposed that way as well. Okay, so, we don't want these blooms, they're a human health threat. In the literature, over the years, there's been a lot of questions with regards to what's driving these events, nitrogen or phosphorus. I won't bore you with the details of them all, but we've looked into this for Lake Agawam, we've done the research. Here's a very simple experiment that has been published where we took water from Lake Agawam, we added nitrogen, we added phosphorus, we added both compounds, and then we looked for the outcome with regards to microcystis, a particular one of those toxic blue-green algae, and the rest of the algae as well. And the results are very clear. In the absence of nitrogen, you can see we have what's called a negative growth rate. We're actually losing. Microcystis is becoming less abundant in the absence of nitrogen, but if you give it nitrogen, it's growing significantly faster, whether phosphorus is there or not. And we even have done experiments where we run the reverse. What if we cut the nitrogen? What would be the outcomes for the blue-green algae? And so that's the business as usual is don't do anything. If we reduce the amount of nitrogen, you can see the percent reductions in biomass that we can achieve during the summer, which is the time when we really do need that relief. So more nitrogen makes these events more intense, and I'll just point out that they also can make them more toxic. Any organic chemists in the room? No? Okay, well. Quick chemistry lesson. Here's microcystin, that toxic compound. I have a red circle drawn around all the nitrogen atoms in the molecule. It's a nitrogen-rich compound, and so the organism not only thrives physiologically and grows faster with more nitrogen, but because the toxin itself is so enriched in nitrogen, when the organism has an abundance of nitrogen, it makes more of the toxin. And it works in reverse as well. If you starve it, it makes less of the toxin. So that's why the dual role is it controls the growth and the toxicity of these blooms. Okay, so we've looked into where the nitrogen's coming from for different watersheds in the village. This is a study that I had done for the village in 2017, I think. And here's the answer. There's a lot of numbers up here. But essentially, what you can see is on-site wastewater, you add up these two numbers, it's almost 70% of the nitrogen going into Lake Agawam. And I'll just point out that even though this is for Main Street, and we're talking about maybe in the future we might sewer Main Street, it wouldn't address all of this either, right? So really there'll be other places in Main Street that would need to be addressed, but all in all, we're talking about 70% of the nitrogen going into the lake coming from on-site wastewater, right? And just to emphasize further, for those of you that wouldn't intuit this already, there's maybe 24 homes in the lake. So of that 70%, maybe 0.5% or less are the homes that are actually on the lake. And I should have pointed out, let me do everybody the favor, here is Sunrise Highway. So this watershed goes really far north. So it's not the homes, the homes in the lake certainly are impactful, but there's a lot more in that area than just the homes in the lake. And for Old Town Pond, a very similar situation. Here, calling out specifically that the sewage treatment plant at the hospital, its effluent does make its way to Old Town Pond, but that's just 3%. So again, that percentage of the total nitrogen going in is getting towards 70% between those two as well for on-site wastewater. Okay, so the biggest source of nitrogen to water bodies is from these septic systems. And again, for those of you who aren't intimately familiar with your septic systems, you may or may not have a septic tank. If your home was built after 1972, you'd have a tank that goes to a leaching pool, and that leaching pool is designed, importantly, the tank holds the solid, the leaching pool is meant to drain into the groundwater, right? That's exactly what it's supposed to do, and that's therefore enriching the groundwater. You can see the idea here, it's enriching our drinking water in nitrogen, and again, things not extracted end up in surface waters. Okay, so beautiful picture, southern Lake Agawam at a sunrise in summer. And we know what the problem is. It's too much nitrogen. It's coming from septic systems. It's exactly an effect on both our drinking water and our surface waters. But we also have a solution. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to talk too much about that because Tom Varley will follow me, but I will mention that we are so fortunate to live in Suffolk County when it comes to this particular issue. If we went back a decade ago, Suffolk County was literally being sued by the EPA for its wastewater practices. Right? EPA sued Suffolk County saying, you're doing what? You're injecting your wastewater into your drinking water source? And literally, there were lawsuits exacted, and there's actually corrective actions in some cases happening there. Right? But Suffolk County stepped up, and starting about a decade ago, or actually 12 years ago now, progressively there have been improvements made to handling of wastewater. And at the center of that is the Sub-Watersheds Wastewater Plan, and the referendum that was passed recently that's now funding this plan. So this plan has made this map, which is prioritizing the upgrade of septic systems to no longer have these concrete systems, but to move into the 21st century and use 21st century technology to get the nitrogen and other contaminants out of the wastewater from our homes before it goes into our groundwater. And what I want you to note about this map here is that it's not that somebody said, okay, we'll just draw a line. We'll say, okay, within 2 miles of the water, we'll upgrade these. And that's not how this was done. This map was scientifically put together by that plan saying, first and foremost, let's protect our drinking water sources. And so you can see a lot of unevenness in here, and that's because there are critical drinking water sources that are being protected by this plan. And then further, it strongly differentiated areas on the South Shore and other water bodies that are highly sensitive to nitrogen, and contrasted those with, say, a big water body like Long Island Sound that's really big, really deep, and isn't really strongly affected by, say, the eastern half of Suffolk County on the North Shore. So, but a huge priority on the South Shore, and you look at the village, all in the highest priority area for upgrades, which is great. And you can see what the outcomes are of what the groundwater nitrogen levels look like. If nothing is done versus putting the plan in place, you see almost all of those red areas disappearing. And that's done by having innovative and advanced septic systems, again, that remove nitrogen and other contaminants. Tom Varley will tell you all about this, but there is a lot of money now available for people to upgrade their systems, and this won't be happening forever. This is short term. We never know what state budgets will look like, but I'll just say, maybe get while the getting is good. And in many cases, this is the price is quoted for some upgrades. The full cost can be covered by these grants. I do direct the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology at Stony Brook University. Our motto is harnessing science to engineer clean water to protect public health and the environment in New York State and beyond. And I'll very briefly mention something that we've designed called the nitrogen removing biofilter. It's a very simple design. We'll say more about it, but it's essentially sand on top of a layer of wood chips mixed with sand. Wastewater is delivered by a drain field that's perforated. This is actually how a lot of wastewater, on-site wastewater is discharged in the rest of the country, not here to date. But essentially what this does is it transforms the nitrogen in this layer and removes it in this layer. We have data of our systems being compared to others, and we have a few different versions of the system here, called the box and line system. The box system achieved the lowest nitrogen levels in piloting during testing by Suffolk County, and that box system looks a little bit different in that the sand layer is disconnected and separate from, the wood chips are separate from the sand layer because the wood chips are in a separate box that we can access from the surface. And I'll just highlight, beyond removing a lot of nitrogen, you can imagine there are other things we have in our wastewater that we don't want in our drinking water source. And we've tested more than 24 different drugs, pharmaceuticals, personal care products that end up in wastewater, and we have very high removal rates of all of them. These are in publications, and these rates that you see here are as good as or better than sewage treatment plants. And these have been provisionally approved in Suffolk County, and therefore can be installed. So I'll wrap up and say the levels of nitrate in village groundwater are high. High nitrate is a public health concern. High nitrogen into village water bodies is promoting toxic cyanobacterial or blue-green algae blooms. The biggest source of nitrogen to those water bodies and groundwater is on-site wastewater. And upgrading on-site septic systems is a proactive and potentially no-cost measure to improve water quality and protect public health. So with that, thank you for your attention, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tom Bartley.
Okay, great. Okay, now we get into the details. So we know we have a nitrogen problem, so that's pretty clear. I'm not going to go into the details of it. Chris just spelled it out. But how do we address this problem? So as Chris mentioned, we do have a solution. So I just want to talk about conventional septic tanks versus low nitrogen septic tanks, because a common theme that I hear from some homeowners, oh, I had my system inspected and the contractor said it was fine. Well, it was fine because it's doing what it was supposed to do. Like Chris mentioned, just drain water into the ground. And the concentration of the discharges of nitrogen that's been going into the ground from septic systems all around is quite high. We're usually around 80 parts per million or milligrams per liter, and we've seen concentrations even higher than that. The new standard for the on-site septic systems is, for the innovative septic systems, is 19 parts per million. So another thing I hear from folks is, well, I didn't really have that much of an impact. I only come out here, it's seasonal, I only come out here for the summer. And if you did the math and you look at a home discharging, say 100 parts per million of nitrogen the whole year, as opposed to, with a new septic system getting 19 parts per million, as opposed to a home that was only occupied from, during the summer months, that would be the same amount of discharge. So we all have an impact on the system. So what is a low nitrogen septic system? Sometimes you hear these words, IA systems or innovative alternative systems, and they're basically designed to remove nitrogen from the wastewater. So there's a number of technologies that have been approved. Each system is different. They all kind of work on the same principle. There's usually a multi-chamber tank. One chamber is aerated, and that stimulates the naturally occurring bacteria to convert the ammonium into nitrates. That's called nitrification. And then there's another chamber that's no oxygen in the water, and that converts the nitrates into nitrogen gas that just escape to the atmosphere. And that's called denitrification. Chris mentioned our NRV technology. It's a little different than the other residential IA systems there. But it's the same kind of technology. During that sand layer is where you do your nitrification, and during the wood chip box, the wood chip and sand layer, you do your denitrification. And Chris mentioned the performance of the systems. There was a lot of systems that were tested by Suffolk County for this program, and if you look further to the right, the existing systems, that would be a system with your standard septic system with no upgrade. So at the center, we think you can get a lot lower than your standard of 19 parts per million. So we've been working by adding these, what we call wood chip box polishing filters onto the residential IA systems that are there. And we've had a couple of installations in Georgia Capon where we had two systems. We had one that was seeing nitrates around 5, and we were able to get that down very low levels. We had another site that the system wasn't working that well for some particular reason, and we were able to get it down to below 5. So currently, we have a grant with the town of Southampton, a separate grant to install 8 wood chip boxes. So I'm looking for sites that we can actually improve the water quality even further. So let's get to the heart of the matter, and this is where the funding is, because you hear all these terms that are floated out there, whether 60,000, 65,000. So how is it broken down? And there's 3 main areas where the grants are. There's a Suffolk County grant, there's a New York State grant, and then there's a town of Southampton rebate. So they work a little bit differently. Suffolk County only pays the grant directly to the contractor. Suffolk County had all the installers that want to participate in the program bid on installs of systems. You know, hey, if it's a FujiClean system or a HydroAction system for a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, give us some prices, because they want to know, you know, how they're going to start reimbursing the contractor on it. The base grant on that is $15,000. That was increased from $10,000. There's also an additional $5,000 for low to moderate income homes. Now, they do rank the applications, and they do give preference to systems that are failed systems ahead of other folks. But when I work with you individually on your upgrades, I can get you a little more details on it. Now, in New York State, grant was just increased to $25,000. There was legislation that just passed increasing it to $25,000. They're still working out the mechanisms of when that's going to be implemented, but I believe in 2026 that they should have that all worked out, and that would increase it to $25,000. And then the town of Southampton has a $2,000 rebate plus $5,000 for low to moderate income if you're in a medium or high zone. So there's a little link at the bottom. Southampton's website, their GIS website. You can enter your address in there. You can actually see, you know, if you're in there. That being said, I've had a lot of homeowners that I've been working with, and if their house is on like the border of that priority zone, I've talked with the town of Southampton and their funding group, and they said have them submit a letter and ask to be included in that. So the programs are changing a lot, and so, you know, I try to stay on top of things so I can educate everybody on how the systems work. This is just a map of the priority areas that are in the village. So you'll see the pink areas are the high priority areas, and the yellow are the medium priority areas. Both of those are eligible with $20,000. And on the, you know, the higher areas in like North Sea area and other parts of the town, if they're closer to the water bodies, most likely they're going to be in a high water quality area. So the basic steps to the upgrade is, and I can't emphasize this more, is get the applications in as soon as you can. And Len spelled it out early on. Submitting the applications does not mean you're going to commit to moving forward with the project. But getting the applications in will give you a better chance of maximizing all the grants that you can get. So I have a lot of homeowners who's like, well, I'm not thinking, well, maybe I'll do it next year, maybe I'm thinking next fall. Good, get your application in. And don't delay on that so you can get into the queue. Some people want to wait until they have all their grants and know what they're getting before they move forward. But with the amount of grants that are available now, the average cost of a 4-bedroom system has been $34,000 in Suffolk County. And some homes is going to be a little bit more depending on your property. If you have high groundwater levels, what's the access for the contractor, but that's been the average running. So sometimes homeowners can get everything paid for with not all the grants. They can get it paid for with just the state grant and the town grant. So I talk with homeowners and I see their commitment to improving on the project, and if they're ready to move forward, I say what we can do is hire an engineer, get the design done, then we can price out the installs, and then you'll know exactly what it is for your company and what kind of have on listings. So you get your grants. Next step would be you contract with the engineer. Then you select this installer. If you're using a county grant, you have to use an installer from their list. The inspectors go out to the site. Your contractor usually gets the permits and everything you need for the install. And then Suffolk County pays the contractor directly. And then the Southampton rebate, it's a rebate program, so you submit the cost after your system is installed. So what to expect? So they need to excavate your property. Typically what they're doing is they're replacing it where your existing septic tank is. Sometimes if it's moving to a different location, they can abandon the septic tank in place, but most of the time, people have tight properties, they're putting it where the existing tank is. So this will fit in, if you have an existing septic tank in your yard, the new system will fit in your yard. So here's a sample of an example of a tank being installed, and it's not just a tank, that is followed by leaching rings. Sometimes your existing structure, your existing leaching rings can be reused if the system's not that old, and that can also keep the cost down on your system. So there are some visual impacts for the IA systems. The covers need to be accessible for servicing it. There's a service agreement. You get a 3-year contract with the installer. That's part of the cost of your system. And they come out twice a year to inspect your system. And then after your 3-year period, the homeowner is required to have an annual service contract. You can use your existing provider, or you can select a new service provider. So here's some examples of, this is FujiClean, these are some covers, they're exposed. Your Eco system's a different kind of system, it has a hatch. It's great for maintenance, but a little harder to camouflage that, and this one is just a Renko system, a hydroactive system. It's very similar, they're just plastic covers. Sometimes your systems are located in your driveway. If that's the case, then they're not going to use these plastic tanks, they're going to use concrete tanks, and they're going to have road-rated covers, so you can be driven on. And they most likely will have the cast iron manholes there. So here's some examples of how people have done some screening on their system. So you have ones that are, just plantings, shrubs. This one, they put the control panel and the covers, just incorporated into landscape. And this is the one that I love. The woman had her landscaper cut out in these slabs a cover over these. Under this is a hydroactive system. So there is a control panel. So we mentioned about the nitrification step is aerated, so there's a little bubbler. Doesn't take a lot of power. It's a quiet system. And the control panel can be remotely located. So a lot of times, here's an example of a FujiClean system. We put the panel on the back of the house, and here's some air conditioning units, and here's the blower. We just tucked the blower in the bushes here. This is a hydroaction panel that was in bushes and ferns. There's actually ferns hidden. And this one is just a pump control panel. I believe that's on David Rhodes' house. That's on by his garage. So you can hide these things. You can put them further away from the house. So after your install, Suffolk County, they come and check the installation before everything's filled in. They're going to witness the startup. You can submit all your documents to Town of Southampton for your rebate. I mentioned about the service agreement and that you're required to have a annual service contract after your 3 years are up. So, what's available to you is part of my job is to educate homeowners on what to expect and what's involved in it. I can assist with the grant applications. I can have guidance on selecting an engineer to design your system. Help you select an installer if you don't have an installer or a septic company that you like, or whatever, or familiar with it. We can get some quotes for it. And I always promote the installation of the most environmentally protective equipment systems, and I encourage people to put on wood chip box polishing units if they have the area for it. So there's no charge for the service. There's cards that you can fill out and put it in there, and please, just, there's a lot of things that I can help you with, things that you might not be thinking of. When I recommend engineers, I typically recommend people that I know are gonna go to the property, do the design, and understand what's being put in. There are some people that will do designs and don't come to your property, and plans get approved and they get submitted, and then, there's a big tree that, was in the way, of the system, and it could easily be changed by just moving it slightly to the side. So, I try to talk with the homeowners ahead of time to say, it's your property, okay? So speak up if there's things that, you're concerned about, and we can talk with the designer about, how best to fit those things on your property. So, so please fill out those cards, and I'm looking forward to working with you. Next, I want to introduce New York Assemblyman Tommy John Scavone.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Gobler, Saturday afternoon, septic systems, I'm in. I think that's great. I come from a long line of plumbers, so I've actually worked on several systems, water wells and whatnot. But I'm in the New York State Assembly. I was on the Southampton Town Board, and I really appreciate the village of Southampton as well as the Lake Agawam Nature Conservancy for their unwavering commitment on this issue of nitrogen in Lake Agawam. But I want to just kind of give you a little history here. I used to teach social studies, and nitrogen or nitrates, that comes originally from the atmosphere, right? We have 8.1 billion people on this planet. Now I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but remember in the 1970s when there was a problem feeding the world population? Now we do have problems with that and challenges, but this has been solved by nitrogen, right? It is the active ingredient in fertilizer. Now, I want you to go back about 110 years to World War I. And in World War I, when the Germans attacked the rest of the world, and the rest of Europe that is, they did not have enough nitrates for their gunpowder and bombs. They used to get nitrates from guano, which is bat excrement, and they would bring that in from South America. And the English blockaded Germany. Now, what does this have to do with Lake Agawam? I'm getting it. The German chemical industry came to the rescue, if you will, and they developed the process to synthesize nitrogen from the air into ammonia, and from ammonia they can make gunpowder and bombs. But the other part of that is that you make fertilizer out of it. So since then, Fritz von Haber has revolutionized the production of nitrates, and we've been doing this for about 100 years. So as a people, as a species, we've been taking nitrogen out of the air and putting it into our waters by growing food. We consume the food through the septic system, and then it goes into our waters. I was always intrigued by that. And you know what? In order to feed the 8 billion people on this planet, I believe it's the right thing to do, but now we're looking at the other end of this. And I am proud to be in Suffolk County, I'm proud to be in the town of Southampton and the state of New York, where we are committing funds and energy towards mitigating nitrogen in our water. Being from Long Island, we're all, 68% Long Island's aquifer, right? We're made up of water, we all drink water from the aquifer. So it is incredibly important for us. Long Island has no viable alternative for drinking water. But beyond that, our surface waters are part and parcel to our economic well-being here on Long Island, and particularly the east end of Long Island. I'm proud to have co-sponsored a bill in the New York State Assembly, sponsored by my colleague Rebecca Castay up in the Stony Brook area, which would increase the state's funding by $30 million for these upgrades in the septic systems. 20 million of that specifically earmarked here in Suffolk County. So we have a long history, actually a short history of this. You know, we kind of did this with the septic systems. But I just wanted to come up and make sure that I gave a little piece of history, and I was actually asked to make an introduction. So I want to introduce a person, a fellow policymaker who is absolutely committed to mitigating water quality and preserving the future of this area of New York State. And I can tell you that it's incredibly important to have policymakers on all levels of government who are committed to solving these issues. We're in the village of Southampton. They do a great job. We're in the town of Southampton, and I can tell you that the town of Southampton is absolutely committed. We've got the Community Preservation Fund, and a significant portion of that is committed to help mitigate nitrogen. But on the county level, we also passed a sales tax, creating yet another water quality fund, and then the county is going to take state funds and get that out the door to some folks. So I'm proud to welcome someone who is a native of Southampton and of the East End, a former trustee and a good friend of mine, and someone who is absolutely committed to this issue, legislator Ann Welker of the 2nd Legislative District.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to see this room be full, and it's exciting on so many different levels to be here today. Super grateful to the Village of Southampton for hosting us in this beautiful spot, but also to the Center for Clean Water Technology and to the Lake Agawam Conservancy. It's just great to be here. I'd also like to welcome the panel to the stage at this point. You've heard from Dr. Christopher Gobler and Tom Varley of Salmas and Southampton campus and New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. But you haven't heard from David Rhodes, who is the owner and principal of TF Engineering, PLLC. TF Engineering is a consulting engineering firm located in Sag Harbor. David is a licensed civil engineer for 29 years, and he's involved in providing engineering services since 1983. He has experience in providing all aspects of commercial, municipal, and residential site development, but is currently focused on improving water quality through the implementation of nitrogen septic systems. David's firm designs and permits approximately 250 low nitrogen septic systems each year. Welcome, David. Also joining us is Peter Toggin. Pete is the Baykeeper and Executive Director of Peconic Baykeeper, an environmental not-for-profit dedicated to the protection and restoration of Long Island's Peconic and eastern South Shore bays. Pete grew up in Southampton, where the brown tides back in the 80s that he witnessed as a child led him on a path to his studies and work in marine science and in education. His current role as Baykeeper is a culmination of his life's mission to protect and restore the East End's precious waterways. Pete, let's start with you. What are some common misconceptions that you encounter when speaking with people about wastewater impacts to our waters?
Okay, so it's gonna I'll be reiterating Tom and Chris a little bit here because they did a very thorough job kind of portraying the issue to all of you. But something as an environmental advocate and kind of interfacing with the community regularly, there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on, whether it's the green lawns or the houses on the lakes, the houses on the ponds. Everyone wants to blame someone else. And as we saw in those slides, pretty much all of Long Island is a watershed. We're in this microcosm, which is the Lake Agawam watershed here. But all that water that, whether it goes down our sink, goes down our toilet, wherever when it goes into a cesspool or into a leaching field, that goes into the groundwater, and that groundwater does not stay there. It's either going to be pumped up for your drinking water, so you want that clean. If not, it's going to slowly make its way to the nearest surface water. So, regardless of whether you're in the high priority or medium priority, we're essentially all in a priority zone. This is really just for the sake of the intents and purposes of which systems are we going to address first. But regardless of where you live, we all have an impact on the water, whether you're seasonal, whether you're out on weekends, or whether it doesn't matter how often you're out here. Even if you're out here for a day, you have an impact on our water quality. So it's really something we all owe ourselves to take accountability for, and I'm really happy to be here today and also to see such great turnout.
Thanks, Pete. I want to ask you one more question, but first I just want to introduce a latecomer to the panel, but not a latecomer in all our work in Southampton town. This is Janice Shearer. She's the government advisor to the Lake Agawam Conservancy. Welcome, Jen. So Pete, as someone who spends a lot of time in and on the East End's waters, both personally and professionally, what are some of the changes you've witnessed over time, over your lifetime related to water pollution?
So when I was a kid, I remember going down to the shores of Little Peconic Bay, 3 or 4 years old. It's kind of about as far back as I can remember. And I remember the water being crystal clear. I remember taking a boat ride into Scallop Pond, which is part of Sabonic Creek by Cow Neck. I remember looking over the edge and seeing these beautiful bay scallops and scooping them off the side of the boat with a net. And hearing all the stories about the scallop fishery and heart clam fishery in the bay. And I vividly remember going back to that same bay just a year later and not being able to see my toes because the water turned dark brown. So that was the first of what became several years of these intensive brown tide algal blooms, which Dr. Gobler has done a lot of work to understand some of the root causes, and which turns out is nitrogen. And we haven't seen that intensity of brown tide algal blooms in our bays, or at least in the Peconics in recent years. But we're also seeing other algal blooms. We're seeing these cyanobacteria blue-green algal blooms in our lakes and ponds. Those weren't there, at least not anywhere near the intensity when I was growing up here. We're seeing rust tides in the bay, so very similar to brown tides where the water turns rusty. These can result in fish kills, hypoxia, which drops oxygen. I've seen bay scallops die off as a result. And we're seeing some other harmful algal blooms as well. So we're not out of the woods yet. The good news is we now have both the scientific understanding and the technology to do something about it. What we need is the willpower to enact that change. And I'm a realist about this. I know this is it's gonna take a while. I personally have replaced my septic system at my house, so if anyone wants to talk to me about that, I'm happy to speak about how that process was for me. As a Southampton town resident, I paid very little. I think it was under $1,000 by the time all was said and done to get my new system. So, really we're at the forefront of change, and, hopefully we can all move this forward and improve our water for the next generation.
Awesome, thank you, Pete. So David, moving on to you, just some of us have smaller lots than others, so how would we deal with an IA system that's in a constrained setting? Can you speak to that on a smaller site?
I sure can. It's not on.
Yeah, can you? Okay. Yeah, I can, and one of the things Tom kind of touched on earlier is that in a conventional system, you got a septic tank and a leaching pool. So a septic tank collects the solids, the leaching pool dumps the effluent back in the ground. The treatment tank basically will replace the septic tank, and it's approximately the same size. So if you can fit a conventional system, you can fit an IA system. And the way the county works is if you have a house, they can't not give you a septic system. So we can usually fit it on every property. But it just depends on maybe you might need a variance or something.
Okay, great, thank you. And then what about in situations where homes are located on or near the water and there's high groundwater conditions? How do you deal with that?
Yes, and around the lakes around here is an obvious point, and the county requires a certain separation between the groundwater and the bottom of the drain field. So we have, the typical way they used to deal with that was that they would just elevate the property up, put leaching pools in there, and build a retaining wall all around the property. When they started the IA system, the county also started adopting what they call a pressurized shallow drain field. This drain field allows you to run up, lower it down by about 2 feet. It also allows you to slope down the sides of the drain field and not have a wall around it. So you don't have a whole wall, but you would have just a sloping grade down along the sides.
Thank you so much, David. Tom, moving on to you. What is or are some of the common reasons you hear from homeowners about being reluctant to upgrade their system?
Yeah, I mentioned on a couple of them. One is the cost. You know, people don't know what it's gonna cost to install the system. But disruption to the property is a concern. And look, some homeowners have grass areas that the system's in, or it's in their driveway. Some owners have, you know, a lot of hardscaping, a lot of landscaping, and they're not ready to do that forward. What I can tell you is I've had a lot of homeowners that have done that have properties where they do tours of their gardens, because they understand that, you know, the disruption is temporary, but the fix that we're looking to make is long lasting. So yes, there'll be some interruption to your property, but there's ways of trying to minimize that. I mentioned about the leaching structures where if your leaching structures are in good shape, sometimes you can just leave them, you know, reuse them. It really depends on the age. The engineer would have to certify them to be still suitable for that use, but that's one way to minimize some of the disruption on the property.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Janice, you have been with this program for quite some time, and over time there have been a couple stumbles along the way. Can you speak to now moving forward, what are some of the things that people might have come up against in the past that no longer exist? And also, what are some things that have been refined and have been made more efficient to now move forward with one's application?
Thank you, and thanks everyone. I also, my day job is the Town Planning and Development Administrator for the Town of Southampton, in addition to helping work with the Conservancy to advise them on how to be a nonprofit advocate in government land. So I did write the water quality plan for this that allowed the 20% of the Community Preservation Fund money to be used for this purpose. And there's different buckets of money, and this bucket of money for these upgrades is always replete with funding. We are going to be upgrading the maps so that the whole village is a priority area, so that's coming up in the new year. There was an issue with, the funding was sort of restricted based on your income, and that was we thought, a barrier, because it doesn't matter how much money you make, you're going to flush that toilet and you're going to put nitrogen in the groundwater. So that got eliminated, we took that out. So it doesn't, the income doesn't matter. The only thing that you do get if you're lower income is more money. So, but the higher income brackets that usually are left out of grant programs are not left out. And that follows suit with the county and the state as well now, so that's important, that was a big change. The other big change is that you're not taxed on this money. Initially, there was this big, you may remember in the paper, there was a lot of talk about, you know, the Suffolk County Comptroller was saying you were gonna get taxed, all of that got resolved, you were not taxed. So if you get $60,000 of grant money, it doesn't get taxed as income. So that was a big important thing. As far as, there's only electrical inspections on the, if you're in the township, not the village. The village also, we don't inspect the systems, the Suffolk County does. So you don't have to worry about like any red tape from the town or the village. It's just a matter of making sure your electrical panel is good to handle, and it's minimal amount of electrical use actually, but they just want to ensure that it's connected correctly, and all the installation gets done by the county. They come out and certify that it's good, and so we don't get involved in that either. So that's helpful. Like, so all of these things were kind of barriers and obstacles initially that we've learned. Also, the town will just engage with your contractor directly, so we will pay out to the contractor just like the county. The thing that we don't is, say you had, and the thing that's good with the town of Southampton's fund is, you know, the county and state are a little more restrictive. We're a little more like, hey, you had to fix your driveway, or you had to move these plants, and this is, you know, you give us the cost of the plants and we'll, you know, reimburse you. So you want to use kind of the county and state money for the system, and the town money is a little more flexible. So that's good because you're able to, you know, be made whole. So everything that was disturbed gets put back, and you don't have to worry about it. So I think, and we keep learning, and we keep trying to make it better, expand the priority areas. Here we're in the village, Southampton will be the whole village. So you don't have to worry about that map or anything else. Along the town, the only reason why we even did priority areas, by the way, was just because we thought maybe we wouldn't have enough funding, but we certainly do now. And so really it comes down to parts that are not included in the new maps are really just like the core of the Pine Barrens and some of those big 5-acre zones that have like nothing there anyway. There's golf courses and things that aren't even built. So coming soon, you'll see those big maps, and that's exciting too. So that we view the whole town as a priority. So thank you.
Thank you, Jess. So each of you has a white card on your seat along with the yellow card. And if you have a question, if you just write it out and pass it down to Sheila, who, oh my, okay, that's great, thanks for comments. If you pass it down, Sheila's coming around to collect them. But while that's being done, Chris, so there are approximately, depending on who you speak with, between 350,000 and 370,000, maybe up to as much as 400,000 antiquated septic systems throughout the county, and we have approximately 3,500 septic systems in the village of Southampton. So that's about 1% of how many are will need to be upgraded. So sitting here today, though, there aren't just people from Southampton Village. There are also people from North Sea, from Sag Harbor, from Watermill. So the collaboration of the Lake Agawam Conservancy, the Center for Clean Water Technology, and Southampton Village, how do we encompass everyone who's here today, even though they may not live in the village?
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody has to go through the same process, right? So I think, you know, even if you're not in the village, you're still gonna need to apply for the same grants and work with the same engineers and the same construction. So it's definitely not a village issue, as you mentioned, it's a Suffolk County-wide issue, hundreds of thousands of systems. And yeah, and we're in, as I said when I was speaking, I'm just emphasizing again, a unique place and time. And these grants are available now. The state grant is a lot of money. I don't think that's going to be forever. And so I think that number at some point will go down. And so now is the right time to take advantage of those funds.
Awesome, thank you. What if someone is considering this, to you as well, Chris? What if someone is considering upgrading, but in their opinion, their septic system is functioning fine. How do we incentivize them, motivate them to upgrade?
And Tom hit on it earlier, I mean, and I've heard this before, like, oh, I just had my system installed and it's functioning fine, and, you know, and the fine is that it's putting all that nitrogen and other pollutants right into the groundwater, that's fine. And so, you know, every home has a nitrogen footprint, everybody's contributing, and so, you know, everybody therefore has a responsibility to take action.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna try and see if I can pull these together a little bit, so we're addressing a couple things at the same time. So, the first one, you guys are just gonna have to share the mic a little bit, I think. So the first one is looking at the power, electricity, and one of the questions that came to us before us is how much electricity is used, and a second one is when the power goes out, do these systems still work?
Yeah, so, you know, the way the county looks at this and the way I look at it is, when you lose your power, you will, as long as it's a gravity system, the system will just act as a normal conventional system as a septic tank leaching pool. So it will continue to operate. You just won't have your treatment. So when you get your power back, it's gonna then kick back in and you'll start to treat again. However, if you're doing this system like I talked about, which was a pressurized shallow drain field, that has a pump in it. So that will not operate during a power outage. However, we can and do put in what they call a manual transfer switch with a generator hookup. So you can hook a generator up to it and keep the pump going while you're not. And you know, as far as power usage, they all vary. You know, they all have pumps, they all have pump air. So there is some air usage or some power usage, but they're going to vary depending on the unit.
These are probably, oh, sorry.
And one thing, and just say that the Center for Clean Water Technology is actually working on a no power system. So we actually have a few installed, they're working really well, not quite ready for prime time, but we do have an NRB that functions purely on gravity, so no electricity needed. So we'll see.
These are sort of along the same lines. Is there a property line setback requirement for the new IA systems? And what are the access requirements for maintenance for a new system?
There is a property line setback for all septic systems. It doesn't matter if it's a conventional system or an IA system, they're exactly the same. And it's 5 feet from the property line. But there's a lot of other setbacks. Swimming pools, houses, electric lines, water lines. So there's lots of setbacks. Now, as far as access, typically there's somebody coming out every 6 months to look at the system, make sure it's pumping, make sure it's working. That access, all you need is somebody to be able to walk out there, pull up with the cover and make sure it's pumping. So it's just somebody walking on the property. There's no special access required.
And also, these are sort of about the systems themselves. What are the ongoing maintenance costs for the system? And do the systems wear out / how long does the system last?
So all the vendors are here, and when you're done here, you can go out and talk to them because the different vendors have different maintenance costs. I don't know what the current costs were, but at one time they were about $350 a year. They may have modulated a little bit since that time. The main thing that wears out would be the air pump. And again, the vendors can tell you what the lifespan of those are. The system itself should last a long time, but the air pumps and any of the mechanical equipment, it has an opportunity to go out.
And I just want to add, the town of Southampton grant money will pay your maintenance contract costs, I think, for the first 3 years. So you can use some of that money for that.
Do IA systems address PFAS?
I am an organic chemist.
Yeah. Oh, good. We have an organic chemist in the room. Obviously, we don't have a lot of data on that. We've tested the NRV, and actually, the NRV does not remove PFAS; it removes all those other chemicals. But you know, they're called forever chemicals for a reason, and so they're really hard to remove. There are other technologies that do remove them, and we're actually the Center for Clean Water Technology. We are working on add-on systems that would go to a septic system that would remove them. We have technologies that can remove them, but there hasn't been a lot of testing.
I just wanted to add a comment that comes up a lot with regards to contaminants and PFAS. What I always say is, if you don't put it down the drain, you don't have to treat it. So I'll say it again, if you don't put it down the drain, you don't have to treat it. And I know that's sometimes easier said than done, but these systems, essentially, they're aerated, they're these biologically driven systems. We want to treat them and let them do what they need to do so they can work, and also be more mindful about what we're actually consuming and putting down the drain.
Yeah, no. The one thing I wanted to mention was, if you're on a property that's being served by a private well for your water source, the county does require that we do a water quality test in order to, and it has to be less than 12 months old when we make our application. If you do have PFAS contamination in the well that's above the threshold, they will make you treat that as part of the septic upgrade. Typically what we do is a reverse osmosis at a point of use.
Thank you.
This technology already exists in Florida. Echo World Water does. We're testing Florida, PFAS, and so on for chemicals built in technology.
Thank you. Are the grants available for residential multifamily buildings up to, this one specifically references 8 units?
Yes, it's just a different, so the IA, like independent single-family homes, are rolling sort of all the time. The grants for like condominium complexes, or, you know, we've had them for schools and churches and other places like that, any kind of commercial use. We had one for a hotel. Those happen, we call them a grant round, and we announce it. It's usually around February, March of each year, and you apply at that time, and because that's bigger money. That's not just, that's allowable beyond the 20,000 per residential. It's usually, well, it would be most likely 8 times the 20,000. You know, they would do some kind of math along those lines, but that happens in a bigger grant application process. But yes, it is allowed and encouraged.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Go. Yeah, I'll just add that the Suffolk County grant is only designed for single-family homes, two-family homes, or single-family with an accessory apartment. So the town has a little bit different rules regarding that, but the county grant is really only for those properties. So also, I want to mention that the town, I verified with them that sometimes you have multiple IA or multiple septic systems on your property. You might have one servicing one part of your house, one servicing another. If you're upgrading both of them, the grant is available for both of them. If you're combining the two discharges into one, then the rebate's only for the one upgrade. So, so that's just some of the little quirks on the grants.
Thank you. And one last question. What impact do bleach cleaning products have on these systems?
Well, all the systems run on microbes, right? So that is to say that the nitrification and denitrification, that's all carried out by bacteria. And so, bleach will disrupt those bacteria, kill them. they will come back, but, you know, and it's likely that a low level of leach is probably fine, right? But a high level, you probably will have an impact. So, yeah.
Yeah, just to go on that a little bit more is that a little bit of bleach won't hurt it. It's not gonna do much to it. We have had a couple of episodes where somebody was cleaning a fish tank with a lot of chlorine and then dumping it down the toilet, and the big flush of chlorine did hurt the system, and they had to then let it come back.
I'll just add one other thing. There is no such thing as a flushable wipe. Okay, wipes do not belong in any system. It doesn't belong in if you were connected to a sewer plant, if you have an IA system, or even your existing septic tanks. They don't degrade, so they're not compatible with the on-site systems.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here today with this impressive group up here, but also thank each of you so much for your interest and your concern about our precious waters. I'd like to introduce, without further ado, Southampton Village Trustee Rob Coburn.
All right, this is going to be quick. Deep breath, everybody. We're within a couple of minutes of getting back outside to learn more about the system. My first job is to thank you all for coming. You've heard that from others, but it's great to see this big group on this important topic. I had the challenge of following all these wonderful speakers and the great presentations, but I also had the privilege of summarizing the reason for hope. And when we all came here, about when we arrived here today, a really gloomy day turned into a pretty nice sunny day. And I think that's a metaphor for what's happened in this world, in this field, over the last 6 to 7 years in particular, and especially with the funniness that's come in now. There is reason for hope. Let me just start with 4 key points. You heard it from these folks, but I want to repeat: nitrogen is the #1 threat to our groundwater. And I think Dr. Goldberg showed this well. We can say it's just the ponds, and from there you can say, to Pete's point about finger pointing, that it's just the people who live around the pond. It's just not true. There's a little bit of concentration. I'm not a scientist. Little concentration in the open waters. But think of Agawam and Old Town Pond and Wickapog Pond as being windows into the groundwater that's under your house, my house, into the quality everywhere. We saw some maps that show that it varies, but the fact is the groundwater under all of us has been poisoned. So, nitrogen is the #1 threat. It's not just the open waters. On-site septic, old-fashioned septic systems is the leading source. So this, just keep it in mind. And what does that last one mean? It means while it's not our fault, it's all of our faults in a way, or say it in a more constructive way, we're all responsible for it. And so we need to act. The action that each of us can take, as you heard today, is an IA system. And the great news is that it's easier than ever. As Janice mentioned, there have been some improvements to the process and certainly improvements in funding. You saw the money that's available. You saw that you've got free advice available from Tom Barley to, when I say advice, really just handle it from soup to nuts, beginning to end. So all you have to do is take your card. This is mine. I'm one of those people who actually had to replace my system on an emergency basis about 8 years ago. And stupid me, in hindsight, I put in a traditional system. So this is my card, all filled out, going in there. And Tom, you owe me a call. I want each of you to do the same. It took me 30 seconds to fill that card out. So do it and get the process started. I've been asked to mention, this is important, if you're part of a neighborhood, a group of friends, a neighborhood association, a civic group, an HOA, anything like that, where you think other people would want to get this information, hear this presentation, mark that other box on your card. And Tom or Lynn will be in touch with you to set that up. They can do it in person, they can do it by Zoom. We really want to get the word out and get more applications in. So final, thank you for coming. Thank you to all our panelists and speakers. Special thanks to the Lake Agawam Conservancy, Iconic Land Trust, Mecox Conservancy, and Stony Brook. They're the folks who keep developing this information, working with the public authorities, paying for people like Tom Farley who can help you walk you through the system. So I wanted to thank all of those organizations for their support. I'll repeat a thanks to Sheila Pfeiffer and to Lynn Arthur and to Nancy Kane for conceiving and producing and publicizing this event. And I would be very remiss if I didn't give a shout out as well to our Deputy Mayor, my fellow trustee, Glenn Zananti, who has put a lot of focus and leadership on environmental issues and this issue in particular. With that, we're done. Go outside, learn more, have some refreshments, and thank you for coming.